After the announcement of the global release date, Throne of Liberty has attracted a lot of new players who have never played the game before. The interest is growing, and with that interest there are obviously questions about the game. After going through many YouTube comments, Reddit posts, comments on various other social media platforms and gaming portals/forums, I have compiled a list of the most asked questions. And with that said, in this video I will be answering 20 of the most asked and most interesting questions. In case you have a question I didn't answer, please write it in the comment. I will read and answer everyone's questions. If there are enough of them, I'll make another video answering them more in detail. And who knows, maybe you even get to see your question in the next video. If you want to stay up to date with Throne of Liberty and get the best information about the game, consider subscribing. It's free. Can you explain pay to win and show everything you can spend real money on and how it affects the game?
Oh shit, here we go again.
Pay to win is a complex topic, so I'll try to be simple and concise. Also, please don't hate me if you don't agree with everything I'm about to say about pay to win. There is a premium currency called Lucent that you purchase with real money. Lucent is used to buy gear and items on the auction house. The main pay to win aspect of this were trades, where players spending real money could get them maxed out very fast. But with recent changes to upgrading and rerolling trades, this aspect of pay to win won't exist anymore. Obtaining, upgrading and rerolling them will be very easy and very cheap according to the developers. Another very small pay to win aspect is buying materials used to craft growth stones and skill books that are used to enchant your gear and level up your skills. It doesn't have almost any impact, as just by playing the game daily, everyone will have more than enough to max out gear and skills. The biggest pay to win aspect, according to the vocal minority, is the ability to straight up buy most OP archboss weapons. But here are the things people aren't aware of. To buy one of these weapons, someone needs to drop it first and decide to sell it. Archbosses won't be available at launch, but will be available around 1 month after release due to the milestone system. Currently there are 2 archbosses and they spawn once a week, which means only 2 weapons can drop per week. Archbosses will be heavily controlled by competitive guilds, meaning that guilds will want to gear up their members rather than sell them. In 6 months in Korea, only 5 or 6 archboss weapons were sold through the auction house, mainly as they are too expensive and not worth the price. There is also a 10% chance to get tradable tier 2 gear from crafting which can be sold, but I wouldn't even call that pay to win, as everyone can craft it by just doing dungeons. Cash Shop only has cosmetic items and 0 pay to win. But recently juiced-up Battle Pass could offer a great value in terms of materials and Solant, which could become a big bottleneck early on. If anything is pay to win, then it is the Blessing of Solisium, which is an optional monthly subscription that offers a lot of quality of life features and some additional features that could fall under pay to win category. The best thing is that any free-to-play player can keep up with potential spenders. And with the knowledge of tier 2 gear, anyone spending real money to push tier 1 gear is borderline stupid, as everything will be super expensive. Plus, they won't be able to buy tier 2 gear. Whales will have to grind the dungeons just like everyone else. You won't even feel real pay to win from a whale in the first 2 or 3 months after release, not until the first castle siege. But even then it won't matter to you if you're a strictly PvE player that doesn't actually care about PvP, as it only has a minor effect on PvP due to Zerging. With recent updates and news, it's clear that Throne of Liberty will become a heavy PvE game with optional PvP. So is this very small and barely noticeable pay to win even worth complaining about? And are you really willing to not even try the game because some big creators who never even played the game or did any research tell you that it is a shit Korean pay to win grinder from NCSoft and Amazon? Throne of Liberty has pay to win, but compared to other known pay to win games, you won't even notice it. How hard are the bosses in dungeons and open world? Are the mechanics hard to learn? PvE is easy as it gets, for me at least. If you are expecting Lost Ark ready difficulty, you will be disappointed. The bosses stand still, cast attacks, and after a specific pattern does a mechanic. And this is completely because the combat and the class system has been designed this way. The game revolves around the Holy Trinity system, where you need one tank, one healer, and rest can be filled with whatever DPS. Tank is a must and is the reason why boss stand still, as tanks generate aggro and have skills that prevent the DPS from taking that aggro. Without tanks, the bosses will run to the next DPS player with the highest aggro, and then this causes chaos. Mechanics are very easy to learn and understand, especially tier 1 dungeons. Tier 2 dungeons do get a bit more chaotic, tighter on the DPS check, as bosses do enrage after some time. And mechanics require some team play and pre-planning. But since neither normal attacks or mechanics are RNG and follow the exact same pattern every time, with time you will understand them without having to think about them. It is exactly the same with open world bosses and arch bosses. They stand still, but their mechanics and some normal attacks can hurt a lot, and will pretty much one-shot you. If you join these open world bosses during conflict time, then you can add additional threat of other players and guilds attacking you, so it can get quite chaotic. The 12-man raids are set for January, which are expected to add much higher difficulty and showcase different boss designs. What is the best build for PvE and what is the best build for PvP? Tanks and healers will always have the priority in both PvE and PvP, and therefore are the two best classes / builds. But if we are talking about the DPS classes, then I have to say that there isn't really the best build. For most situations, builds adapt and change on the fly, depending which content you need it for. One build isn't going to be good for bosses and mass PvP. You will need to do small changes and remove or add skills that fit the content you're trying to do. The good thing is that there are a lot of skills to choose from, and more skills are always added for each weapon with each major update. The great thing about Throne of Liberty is that you can play whichever two weapon combinations you prefer, with Dagger being your secondary due to insane passives it gives. They are all great and you can set them up to your liking. I played Longbow plus Dagger, and I never felt like I was being outmatched in PvE or PvP. Unless you're a tank or healer, play what you like, not what others tell you is the meta. There are no meta weapon combinations, as some will be stronger in PvP but weaker in solo PvE content. But if I have to give you one weapon combination that excels in PvP, due to the Zergfest nature of PvP, it would have to be Staff plus Dagger or Wand, due to massive amounts of AoE damage it can give. And for PvE bosses and dungeons, honestly anything is good. Don't think about it too much, watch gameplay videos for your favorite weapons and play what you like. Why are guilds so important and can I play solo without a guild? You can most definitely play solo and progress relatively fine, but the whole game was built on the premise of offering social aspects. Even if you are not into PvP and castle sieges, you should still join at least a small guild. Guild raids are very important as they can give the same rewards as every open world boss, meaning you can kill them with your guild and obtain gear that can be shared between all the guild members. That's why being in a smaller guild could actually benefit you, as you won't need to compete with 70 plus other guild members for the drop. It also helps to always have a group of people you can join up with for some dungeons, events or open world farming, instead of relying on random groups. But honestly, as someone who never really enjoyed PvP in MMORPGs, the PvP, Node Wars and Castle Sieges are some of the most fun times I had playing in Throne of Liberty. The drama, the backstabbing, shit talking in chat, the politics all add up to an incredible guild experience. Plus, as a new player, you can always learn more, learn faster and get guidance and help from more experienced guild members. Does Throne of Liberty respect my time or do I need to grind 10 different alts? Contrary to the popular belief, Throne of Liberty absolutely respects your time. It is designed to be played as a one single character, meaning alts are pretty much useless, unless you want to play a different weapon combination. Then it might still be cheaper to create a new character rather than re-rolling your current character. Some say that there is too much daily to do, some say that there isn't enough daily content. As long as you clear your daily required content, which shouldn't take more than 2 hours, everything else is pretty much optional. The rewards in dynamic events have been changed, so it's not really that mandatory to do them every few hours. One day you can go for an open world dungeon grind, the next day you focus more on the events and open world bosses, on the third day you focus on some solo content like tower or the new upcoming life skills, fishing and cooking, On 4th day you can join some PvP events or try the new 3v3 arena. There is a lot to do, but nothing is really mandatory that will set you behind. You never really fall behind. Take it from my own personal experience in Korea. I never did any events, open world bosses or PvP. I just farmed the dungeons and occasionally did open world dungeon farming for Solant. I had a maxed out gear level with 60% of trades completed, doing only 30% of the available content. Even today, after not playing since March, I could still join most of the endgame dungeons, clear them, and within 2 or 3 weeks catch up to the people who never quit. And all of that as a free-to-play player, which is the most important thing to note here. I heard that the endgame loop gets boring. What is everything you can do in the endgame? Endgame loop is by no means boring. It could get boring before, but the game has been improved and adjusted significantly since the release that there is honestly so much to do as of right now, and there will be even more content in the future. The major endgame content are dungeons. You get daily tokens that allow you to open the chest at the end of the dungeon and get the rewards. It is the most important progression system in the game as you grind for best in slot gear pieces, Lucent and Solant. There are a number of dungeons available with its own tier and difficulty, each containing unique loot. Next we have daily contracts that are your standard daily quests, where you are required to kill X amount of mobs or collect X amount of things. And also weekly open world dungeon contracts which work pretty much the same, giving you RNG based rewards. Open world dungeons can also be farmed whenever for rare tradable drops and Solant. Next there are open world bosses, arch bosses and dynamic events. Open world bosses and dynamic events start every few hours, while arch bosses spawn once a week. All of them can be in peace or conflict mode. The rewards are RNG and contribution based, so don't expect anything crazy. Node Wars aka Boonstones and Reefstones are PvP guild oriented endgame content, where 2 guilds in an instance 1v1 area fight for the control. Boonstones offer resources and stats for guild members, while Riftstones offer a daily world boss kill exclusive for the controlling guild. The pinnacle of endgame PvP content are castle sieges and tax delivery events, which are completely open world, where everyone can participate. Expect massive alliances and Zergs to dominate those. For solo content there is Tadal Tower, which can be done once for some really good rewards. Gate of Infinity, which is a much harder version of Tadal Tower that offers skill books as rewards and also has a leaderboard showing fastest solo kills. There is more content coming in the future, but since we don't know the details yet, I will skip talking about it in this video. How hard is it to re-roll to a different class/build? It used to be almost impossible and very expensive, but with skill conversion books it was made much easier. These books can be obtained in cash shop and through various seasonal events, battle passes and such. I would only recommend using these books when you have high-end gear and most of your skills maxed out. But if you already get this far with upgrading one build, then what's the point in swapping? Early on, I would recommend just creating a new character and starting over. Through leveling, the game showers you with materials and books to the point where you can have a stacked character within a few days of playing on that new character. Creating new characters is the best strategy to test different weapon combinations and builds before deciding on what you want to make. But there is also a third option, which is simply having multiple different weapons and builds by leveling and upgrading gear, skills and different weapons. This is a more expensive one and very grindy, but in Korea most players have 3 or 4 different weapons, gear sets and skills upgraded, where they just swap them to whichever type of content they need it for. Hacking, botting and scripting was seen already in closed beta test. How is it currently in Korea? It is as bad as you can imagine. They introduced a system that spawns a big monster next to a player that exhibits bot-like behavior, aggroes to it and kills it. But this only worked to a certain extent and wasn't really as good as it sounded like. Players also use macros, scripts and literal hacks that allow you to have perfect blocks in PvP, which are impossible to detect. A lot of players also use AFK 24/7 farming bots, but even with a lot of reports, nothing really happens to these players. When confronted with these problems during a live Q&A session, they acknowledge these issues, said that they are working on it, but they have been working on it since release pretty much. They have failed to ban players who use macros and hacks, they don't ban bots who are easy to detect. You would only really need 2 or 3 GMs to fly around the map for 1 or 2 hours a day and permaban them, but that's also not being done. And icing on the cake is when developers were confronted about plague of bots, their response was that every game has bots, and that no game has ever completely solved the problem with them. So why should they? Bots, hacks, scripts and macros are in my opinion the biggest things that could completely kill the game in the West. Amazon wasn't great in dealing with bots in Lost Ark, so it's understandable that players have big concerns regarding these issues. I quit Lost Ark due to gatekeeping in raids. How is the situation with gatekeeping in Throne and Liberty? With Throne and Liberty's biggest progression being dungeons, you would think that there is a major gatekeeping present, but you would be wrong. The gatekeeping is definitely there, but it is very light and in a sense very justified. The initial tier 1 dungeons are fairly easy, both mechanically and DPS check-wise, so the only requirement players have is that you either have a +9 blue tier weapon or +6 purple tier weapon. Getting +9 blue weapon can be achieved in the first week of playing the game, so it's very easy and cheap. Nobody will question your knowledge of mechanics, but expect to be kicked out of the group if you keep failing the same mechanic without asking for help in chat. There will be a lot of veterans on global launch. Some will not tolerate your failing, while others will be helpful and willing to teach you. On the other hand, tier 2 dungeons have a bit of a higher but justified gatekeeping. They are harder, more mechanically difficult and require a lot of team play. The justified part is that you need to have a certain amount of HP, defense and gear to survive some hard-hitting mechanics that would otherwise one-shot you, and having the knowledge of mechanics of course. The bad part is that clearing tier 2 dungeons once gives you an achievement, which, yes, you guessed it right, you can link in the chat. So most experienced group will almost always ask you to link it in the chat, otherwise you won't get invited, hence the gatekeeping. There are plenty of learning groups doing it for the first time, so you won't have problems joining one. How long does it take for a free-to-play player to max out his character? A lot has changed since the game was initially released in Korea. Many progression systems have been adjusted, updated and made much easier, requiring less grind and less resources. The main endgame progression system was gear traits, but with the most recent news, this will be made much easier and cheaper. Getting full traits on every gear piece required real money. Now it does. Upgrading all gear pieces to +9 does not take long either, especially initial blue gear and purple tier 1 gear, as you can transfer from blue to purple skipping 6 levels. In theory, depending on your luck and how much daily playtime you get, you could max out tier 1 gear before the first siege, which is 2 months after release. But if you are looking beyond tier 1 into tier 2 and archboss weapons, then maxing out those gear pieces will take much longer than 2 months. Since we don't know the details of the new dungeon system, it's hard to know for sure how much faster or slower maxing out will be. Also, with the introduction of several new progression systems like skill traits, runes and artifacts, it won't be just as simple as upgrading gear to +9 and rolling traits. But overall, early on you can most definitely keep up with any potential real money spenders, as their spending won't speed up their maxing out by much, as 80% of the things will require grind since it will be bound on pickup. How is the weapon balance in PvP? Not just weapon balance, but overall class/build balance is not great in PvP. Tanks are broken, OP and unkillable units that deal decent damage and can definitely cause chaos in the backline. AoE and perma CC are the kings, and melee weapons still kinda suck, unless you find isolated low HP targets. Most of the competitive PvP is in large groups and Zergs, while you will occasionally find yourself in 1v1 situations during nighttime in open world dungeons or during faction PvP events. Castle sieges are a complete shitshow where bigger Zerg in theory always wins regardless of anything else. PvP does still require skill, and a lot of top players on the kill leaderboards were fully free to play in Korea, which means that gear helps, but isn't that big of a factor if you're in a 3-on-1 situation. With the introduction of 3v3 arenas, which won't be equalized, You can only imagine which classes will be the top and how broken of a balance the game actually has. You don't really see it in a mass PvP, but arenas will show a different view, and I can honestly see it being completely dead and overrun with broken classes. I like fast-paced action MMOs, while I enjoy Throne of Liberty's combat. If you like fast action-paced MMOs, then unfortunately Throne of Liberty combat won't suit your style really well. It most reminds me of Arcade combat, but it's not fully static and you can cast and throw most skills while moving. It is tap targeting, but it offers both classic mode and action mode. Classic mode is what World of Warcraft uses, and action mode is where you can freely move your camera with a mouse. Classic mode is definitely the preference for most of the players, but I am not a fan of it and I use action mode as I like being in full control of my camera with a mouse. The combat is on the slower side, the bosses don't really move and you get to stand still most of the fight and just spam abilities, which could get boring, but with PvP being available, it does actually quickly become faster and action-packed. The combat most definitely won't appeal to everyone, but the way I see it, the most popular MMORPGs today only use slower tap targeting combat, while fast-paced action combat MMORPGs are on the lower end with their dedicated hardcore player base and communities. In closed beta test, I was overwhelmed with the amount of daily activities and events. Are all of them mandatory? CBT, due to time constraints, used a much faster progression and much faster milestone unlocking. On release, the game progresses slowly through milestones that won't unlock as fast, meaning most of the endgame events will be locked for the first month, meaning there won't be as many of them to choose from. In CBT, they were also on a much faster schedule due to obvious reasons of Amazon wanting to test everything properly. Many changes have been made to dynamic events. Right now, the Peace mode events are contribution based, meaning others can't really yoink your kills and drops. Conflict mode events were turned into a 3-way faction PvP event where everyone is randomly assigned to a faction. This is to prevent alliances and guilds from zerging and farming these events for free. You can pretty much skip these events as they are not that mandatory anymore. If you want to level up your skills, the best way is through Gate of Infinity as it provides a lot of skill books and bosses are fairly easy to kill. Open world bosses in Peace mode are in an instance area where the kill is very fast, taking maybe 5 to 10 minutes of your time every few hours. Farming open world dungeons will become an activity that could be mandatory depending how rare the drops of new runes will become. Aside from that, as long as you do your daily contracts and daily dungeons, you have many, and I mean many options on what to do next, and none of those are really super mandatory. You can take your time, and trust me, not doing everything won't set you behind. Play at your own pace and do what you want and what you have time for. How bad is the RNG for upgrading gear and leveling skills? The best thing about upgrading gear and leveling skills is that you cannot fail. Every time you click that upgrade button, you will gain a random but specific amount. That specific amount is shown in the tooltip, as well as the odds of getting one of them. This upgrading system might feel very basic and you might feel like it's too easy to max +9 on gear and level 5 on skills. But trust me, it does take some time, especially purple gear and purple skills. By the time you get all purple tier 1 gear pieces to max upgrade level, tier 2 gear will be likely introduced and you start all over. And when you get your tier 2 gear fully maxed out, the legendary gear from 12-man raids in January will most likely be out. Yes, it is basic and straightforward, but you never really stop farming Growthstones and Solant as there is always something else waiting to be upgraded. The RNG on upgrading traits was something else, but it also had a blessing/pity system, which accumulated every time you failed. This is where the most pay to win would come in, but now with the next major update, that RNG is completely removed. Is there a transmog system? How good are the costumes and cosmetic items? There is no official transmog system yet. Every gear piece changes your appearance. If you combine a robe with heavy chainmail legs and helmet, add cloth or leather boots and gloves, and you can imagine how weird and funny that would look like. The worst part is that you will probably end up combining gear pieces like that. That's why there are costumes and weapon skins, which in all honesty have been crap. Korean players were requesting more booba skins that showcase more skin on female characters, but there haven't been any so far. It's a wasted opportunity to get that desperately needed revenue. The weapon skins do look nice and they can completely change the whole vibe of your character, even if you don't use any costumes or just use regular gear appearance. The best part is the cloak, which imprints your guild's logo on the back. The Zerging was unbearable in CBT. Has anything been done to change it? If you experience huge amounts of Zerging in CBT, I have some good news though. The Node Wars aka Boonstones and Riftstones have been changed into a 1v1 guild vs guild battle. PvP conflict dynamic events have also been changed into faction PvP events, where every player randomly joins one of the 3 factions. This was done to prevent big alliances, guilds and zergs from freely farming events without any contest. Now you can enjoy some balanced 1v1v1 PvP event while also doing the PvE side of it. Now for the bad news. Conflict open world bosses and arch bosses have stayed the same. It's an open world PvP battle and massive alliances and zergs will fight for the kill and the highest contribution to get the best gear drops in the game. Finally, castle sieges and tax delivery events are also massive zerg vs zerg battles, and honestly, for the rewards you get from both arch bosses, siege and tax delivery, I think that it should stay fully open world, allowing everyone to participate. Because the problem with this isn't zerg, it is when the numbers are not balanced. If for example you have a 1000 vs 1000 alliance battle, then that would be fine, right? But with the current guild alliance system, it can easily be 2500 versus 500 battle. Now that is a problem. And this was the case in the first siege in Korea, and it was the case in the CBT. The only way to fix this is to limit the amount of allies a guild can have, and remove Watched, as that was used to abuse the alliance system, which allowed guilds to be allied without being able to target and attack each other, creating massive zergs. We will see if anything changes related to that before global release, but so far it's not looking very likely. Are there rewarding activities where I can just grind mobs and turn off from reality? If you want to relax by just grinding for a few hours, open world dungeons will be the best place for you. There you can farm very rare gear drops and rare lithographs that are tradable, which means you can sell them. So in a sense, you would be farming the premium currency. In there you can also farm massive amounts of Solant, which is a currency you can never have enough, trust me. On top of that, the normal mobs and elite mobs can also drop materials like Marvins, which are also tradable and sellable. But also you can use them to craft purple skill books and upgrade your skills. Lower level open world dungeons are best done solo, but once the milestones progress towards the endgame, more higher level difficult open world dungeons will open, with mobs that will have a very high HP and will be hard to farm solo, as it would take too long to kill them. In that case, farming in a full group with one healer will be the most efficient way for all the potential rewards. Why is gathering and crafting so bare bones? The game was never designed with crafting and gathering as one of the core and the need systems. It is just there to exist in a sense and to fill the world with something to interact with. Most of the gatherables are used for daily contracts and they don't really serve a much bigger purpose. Same with crafting, where it is very basic, simple and easy to understand once you know which materials you need for a specific recipe. There are a few tiers of materials that you can either craft up or dismantle higher tier to gain lower tier materials. But you are in luck, my friend, because the next major update introduces fishing and cooking, which are both going to be solo content. The details on how it will work and how it will affect the current crafting system, gear and skills is unknown. They are also adding something similar to Dispatch from Lost Ark, where you can send your Amitoys on expeditions to farm items and materials for you. How is the performance and FPS optimizations in large-scale events? Do I need to upgrade my PC? According to my research, reading a lot of posts, comments and Discord messages, I can safely confirm that Throne of Liberty runs really well on mid to high-end systems, as well as performs exceptionally well on consoles. I have a pretty strong PC with RTX 4070 with Ryzen 7700X and 32GB of RAM, but I was playing the first Castle Siege on full epic settings on a 1440p resolution without any FPS issues, stutters, crashes and lags. It runs very smoothly in all types of content, and you should honestly be fine playing with mid settings on a 20 series card or high settings on a 30 series card. You can also check my open world benchmark video and also Castle Siege video to see how the performance is yourself. If you do have a low-end system with 10 series or lower card, you might need to upgrade some parts, as it will be hard to gain decent performance even on low settings. What is one advice you would give to all new players? I will give you the same advice as I did before Lost Ark was released. Do not rush leveling. Play at your own pace. Do not worry about being behind and missing out on content. Throne and Liberty progresses slowly through milestones, and unless you are a hardcore player who wants to appear in the top 100 first to level 50 leaderboard, then by all means feel free to rush. But as a new player who knows nothing about the game, take your time, play slowly, learn the game at your own pace, and enjoy the story. I promise you, you will not fall behind if you are not level 50 on day 1. The real endgame starts around 1 month after the release, so you have more than enough time to get there, learn the game and gear up. If you made it this far, I have a very special bonus for everyone who still asks on my videos, Reddit posts and Discord servers. When is Throne of Liberty releasing on the West? If you really still don't know the release date, well, here it is. Throne of Liberty is releasing globally on September 17, 2024, with a potential 3-day head start for Founders Pack pre-orders, meaning on September 14, 2024. If you have any other questions that I missed, or you want to know more details about things I've answered, please write them in the comments. I read and I reply to everyone. And if you want to learn more about the game, you will want to watch my full review of Throne of Liberty.